All right, my computer just died, which is really sad, but it gave me an opportunity to come and sit out here at the park, and I thought I'd just go over some of my notes with you of things that I learned at Live Sound Summit. So I'm going to try and get into some details. If you also attended Live Sound Summit, I would love to get your notes, so maybe we can trade notes. I love Dave Rad's story of how one of his sound systems, about a sound system that he worked with that he felt didn't work very well in the far field. He said they were just like pushing this thing too hard. And he said like it measured really good. And they were saying like, look at the measurement. And he was like, no, I'm telling you, it doesn't sound good. So he created a 400-foot long headphone extender so he could take his headphones all the way out into the far field of this array, and then put his headphones on, listen to the music that was playing, take them off, and then show the technician that was helping him and say, look, make it sound like it sounds in the headphones. So interesting story about things seeming to measure well, but not producing the desired audio outcome to the ears. Dave Rad said, the worst thing that we ever did for correlated signals is also the best thing we ever did, which is subs on an aux. So the mix is clean, but you set the stage for uncoupled subs to create power alley. Lorene Bohannon talked a lot about the difference in hearing between men and women, and the main thing that I remember from that is that women are faster at localizing, so things around them, up and down, left and right, but men are more accurate of localizing. Darren De La Soul said, optimism is not just positive thinking. Stephen Pavlik talked all about FM transmitters, which is important right now because a lot of people are doing drive-in concerts and broadcasting with FM transmission. And the important takeaway from that presentation for me is that, number one, a lot of these things are illegal. And he talked about how people, manufacturers will build them, send them to the FCC and get licensed so that it has a license number, and then get them back, and then they'll crank up the gain. Because for the thing to be licensed, it can actually only transmit maybe like 50 feet, which isn't that helpful for most people. So they crank it up so it can transmit 200 feet and then becomes illegal. And the second important part of that is that if there's someone who's at fault, it's you. So it's the operator. And so if the FCC shows up because someone makes a complaint, then the person who could get the $10,000 fine is actually you, because you're the one sitting there operating the thing. And you might say, well, I just got hired for this and I didn't make the choices, but it's still you. I learned from Drew Brasler that a notebook and pen looks better than a phone. And I thought that was interesting because I often take notes on my phone, but he was saying that for people, it just looks like you're playing on your phone and not listening to them. So it's better to have a notebook and then later like take a photo of it or put it into your phone. Bob McCarthy talked about coverage in terms of beer. So you cover as far back as the beer carts go. That's where coverage ends. He showed us this really cool subarray that they used at the Roskilde Festival. It's called Upward Staggered Down Tilted In-Fire Array. It looks really crazy. It's these 3 stacks of subs, and the sound is going this way, but because it's an in-fire and they're stacked like going up, the sound actually goes down into the audience and keeps the stage really clean. I also learned from Scott that people will notice a change in tonality much quicker than they will a change in amplitude. Oh, I love this quote from Nathan Short. So he said, when the sound is right and there's no distortion, people stay for 2 more drinks, and after 2 years, you've paid for your sound system. So he's really figured out the economics of the sound system down to that number, which is great. I've seen Merlin Van Veen give this presentation about M-Noise a couple of times already, but hearing it for the 3rd time really helped. I'm still learning more things about coherence. So I think the thing that I took away this time is that coherence is really this lump sum indicator. It doesn't tell us, it tells us that there exists a problem, but it doesn't tell us what the solution is. So then it's our job to like go out and track it down. I really loved Bodo Felush's presentation. He had a panel of 6 or 7 people, and they all just talked about audio quality and like, does it matter? When does it matter? And I don't remember the quote exactly, but I wrote down, if the sound quality gets below a certain level, the customer thinks there's a video problem, or they don't know what the problem is, but they feel annoyed. So we can't really rely on the audience member or the customer to tell us, much like coherence. They can tell us that there's a problem, and that's important feedback for us, but then it's our job to figure out like what the real solution is. So the customer might say there's a video problem, but what they really mean is it turned out that there was an audio problem, and that just made them think that something was wrong. Mauricio talked about 2-element asymmetrical gradient arrays for 2 hours, and it was amazing. I'm so interested in this stuff. And really the takeaway for me is that there's all this interesting stuff you can do with 2 subwoofers, which is great because I mostly work on smaller, medium-sized shows that may only have 2 subwoofers. And yet there's so many creative solutions you can do with coverage just with those 2 elements. Pooch's 4 fundamentals. I think I've seen him give this presentation before or heard about this before, but I always forget that he doesn't include EQ in those 4 fundamentals. He includes high pass filter and low pass filter. And I always forget about high pass filters for live sound. I always forget about low pass filters for live sound, but he talked about how he said, I only want the sparkly bits in some places. So he's removing high end from other places. Volker's presentation was amazing. I don't know. There were some things about humidity that I wrote down, but really it was just the scope of the Eurovision Song Contest was so amazing. Like 9 live shows, 12,000 people, 232 microphones, 54 days from load in to load out, 150 L-acoustic speakers, like just these huge numbers. There's like 16 consoles. It was such a great story. Oh, I know what I took away. The vinyl tubing from the aquarium store. That was everyone's favorite takeaway. One of the presenters ended up wearing a dress made of metal, which acted like a Faraday cage. So the transmitter wouldn't work inside her dress. So they took the wireless transmitter out of her dress, put it on something on the back, and then they had to put a piece of vinyl tubing from an aquarium store on the antenna so that it wouldn't touch the metal. And Volker mentioned that when he goes to work, I think he said in Rio de Janeiro, somewhere in Brazil, when he goes to work regularly, there is an aquarium store around from his hotel room, and the person who runs the aquarium store knows him by name now because he always comes in there to buy this vinyl tubing. I love this quote from John Burton. When did we start needing to see EQ curves to know that it sounds good? And that just connects with, there was a great moment where someone asked him what he thinks about the LV1 console. And at first he didn't know what that was. And it was just so like outside of his consciousness. And then someone explained to him that it's like this touchscreen. He's like, oh, the Waves console? Of course not. Why would I ever use something like that? And then he went on this whole tear about what a terrible idea that is. I thought that was great. Jeremiah Carney said that audio is a series of compromises. They have this thing in Blueprint called Y weighting, which I thought was interesting. So they basically just use this bandpass between 2 and 8 kilohertz because that range is most affected by changes in splay and vocal presence. Oh man, Robert Scoville just melted my brain, and I think it did the same thing for a lot of people. But he talked about solving tiny timing issues, which you would think don't make a change. So he talked about the tiny timing issues that happen just between people on stage, which no one really thought of. But then when people started wearing headphones in studios, all of a sudden the timing got better because just the timing in between, the distance between them on stage made them like out of sync a little bit in the recording. And so you fix that with headphones, IEMs. But then he also talked about the tiny little timing changes that happen in our console when we add plugins, do different kinds of processing. And he said a lot of people would think that that doesn't do much, but then he played us an A/B track comparison of doing manual delay synchronization on every channel so that every track comes out together at the same time out of the output and is synchronized. So he fixed all of that, and then he played us an A/B comparison where he turned all of the manual delays off, and then when he turned them on, and you could really hear it. I really didn't think I was going to be able to hear it, but you could really hear it, and it makes a really big difference. So I was really surprised by that. Chris Huff talked about the importance of having a purpose when you are doing leadership, be it at a house of worship, or anytime you are the leader, you kind of need to know what your purpose is and communicate that to the team. Nuno's presentation, Nuno Coelho with Hakon Hamas, I'm probably saying your name wrong, sorry dude, but their presentation was so cool. All pass filters. I never understood this big difference that Meyer Sound pursues this kind of system optimization where you first direct the high frequency energy in your array, and then you use low mid beam control to sort of do what you need to do in the low end to make the low end match the high end. And the L acoustics method is sort of the opposite. So first you do what you do to kind of make the low end do what you want to do, and then you have the high end follow that. So two different design philosophies, and I didn't know that L Acoustics doesn't do low mid beam control. That was really interesting. And then at the very end, Nuno gave us this app that he just created that will allow you to calculate the all pass filters that you need if you want to do low mid beam control in any array. So I was so excited about this because normally if you want to do low mid beam control, you have to go into MapXT or Compass or something like that, and it's only like a Meyer Sound product. Now it's low mid beam control for anyone with any array, so that was super cool. A lot of people like this quote from Beth O'Leary. She said, "I'm the idiot testing your idiot proofing. If something can be misunderstood on your stage plot, I will misunderstand it." So she talked about the importance of having a really clear stage plot, and she walked us through how to do that. Alish had a lot of good tips for mixing and creating an IEM rig and then mixing IEM monitors. He said, you got to be good, don't mess up, someone else will get your gig. Which channel do you monitor when you're mixing IEMs? He said, usually you want to monitor the money channel, which is often the lead singer. You can never leave the system. Once the IEM system is on, you can't leave because you're responsible, and it's like a safety issue if anyone has their IEMs in and you are there being the operator of that system. Because if you walk away and something happens, then you could end up, damaging someone's hearing and being negligible. Although it doesn't have a huge effect on us that I can think of right now, I really enjoyed Adam Hill sharing his information about research that NASA has done about low frequency exposure. So first of all, basically there's a chest resonance between 50 and 60 hertz. Let me see if I wrote that down. Yeah, I believe that was the number. And that's part of the reason why long exposure to low frequencies can end up having negative effects on your health. So he talked about an experiment that they did in NASA where they exposed mice to, I think like nonstop low frequency pollution exposure for a long period, something like weeks maybe, and ended up seeing, it did weird things to their brains. So sorry, I can't remember the story very well, but the stuff on testing how being overly exposed to low frequency sound can be bad for your health, and how earplugs can't really stop that. There's nothing that earplugs do in that region because the sound just goes into your body, up into your inner ear canal. Cool, so those are my takeaways from Live Sound Summit. I'd love to hear yours, so please comment below this video. Thanks.